Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another NBA off-season breakdown and season preview on this channel here, Swish City, where I, your host, Bruce Veliz, will be diving and exploring every single team before the start of the season to go over my breakdown of their off-season and what they did, and to look forward to what they can be going into this new year. And in today's episode, we're going to be diving and exploring the Toronto Raptors, as you can tell by the thumbnail and the title. So if you do enjoy this content, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you are a Raptors fan, let me know your thoughts and predictions on the Toronto Raptors. And if your team is not been mentioned yet, as we've talked about some other teams here already in the Eastern Conference, make sure to stay tuned as we're going to be diving in and exploring every single team. So like I mentioned, your team will eventually come up, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But without further ado, let's dive in and let's explore the Toronto Raptors. And for me, the Toronto Raptors are a little bit in a weird spot. Last season, they fell in, towards the bottom half of the Eastern Conference, and then didn't really have that much growth within their players and kind of stayed stagnant, specifically in a division as well that is pretty solid with some top teams like the Celtics, Knicks, and even the Sixers, who were, mentioned among the top three. It is very concerning for why Toronto wants to stick this middle path, but they continue to do so, and even this year are planning to do the same after making some very minimal movement to their roster after last year not really achieving much in dealing with some injuries. So if we want to dive in and explore the Toronto Raptors, this one may be shorter compared to a lot of other teams because they realistically didn't do too much. As we see, they only added 3 players, one of them being a two-way guy that they drafted, and they only lost 2 guys. They didn't trade anyone from their team, right? They basically are just running it back and hoping that this young core can be a little bit better in this division, specifically with this division dealing with some injuries going into this year, and hopefully could take a little bit of a rise in an Eastern Conference that is kind of middle of the pack right now. So let's dive in and let's explore the Raptors first, looking at the additions. So for the Raptors, they went out and they only made one signing. They went out and brought in Sandro Mamukelashvili from the San Antonio Spurs. And this is a signing that I really do love for a lot of reasons. Not only do I have some attachment to Sandro Mamukelashvili, as I went to Seton Hall, where he did obviously play basketball and graduate from. So I've been able to see Sandro play with my own eyes for at least 2 years while I was at Seton Hall University. And what I can tell you is Mamu has grown from being a college player and has really taken the stances of, a stretch 4 / small ball shooting 5 into the hands into the NBA, and has really impressed. He obviously was drafted to Milwaukee, was behind Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, Giannis Antetokounmpo, that kind of front court, so didn't really get to blossom. But in instances when the Bucks, had some blowout games or needed Mamu to come in towards the later of the season, just resting some guys, he did showcase some light, and that transitioned into the Summer League, where he made the first Summer League team the following season, and then ultimately went and ended up on the San Antonio Spurs after he was waived by the Milwaukee Bucks. San Antonio picked him up the year before they drafted Victor Wembanyama, with still some question marks in their center position. But then obviously, once Victor was drafted, they then had guys like Zach Collins and even more guys in that front court, which limited Mamu's ability to really be able to shine in San Antonio. But this past season, Mamu got that green light when Wemby went down towards the second half of the year, and really impressed, having some big games and showcasing that the stretch 4 / small ball shooting 5 can be someone that can hit some great 3-point shots opportunities, solid passing big, can rebound, and I think is going to be a great fit on the ends here for Toronto, kind of complementing their rotational unit, playing in as that backup / 4 or 5, and we'll see where he does shine there. They also drafted Colin Murray-Boyles and Elijah Martin. Colin Murray-Boyles coming out of South Carolina. The power forward is a fantastic rebounder. The one thing, obviously, that's a little weird with Murray-Boyles is his height, as he is a little bit shorter for that power forward center. I believe is around 6'7", 6'8", but ultimately he has that wide enough frame and has that strength and defensive versatility to be effective down low there in the paint. Elijah Martin, their second round pick, comes in from Florida, who is also another fantastic piece for that championship team, and he finds himself on as a two-way player for this Raptors team alongside Chucky Hepburn and Ulrich Chomche, who are going to be playing and competing for that Raptors main spots maybe throughout the season. But Colin Murray-Boyles and Sandro Mamukelashvili are those two front court additions that are going to be brought in to Toronto this off season, and ultimately for them, I think do help them out. Next, we're going to look at the losses that the Raptors took, and once again, they didn't really bring much in, so there's not really that they can lose, and they ultimately did lose Chris Boucher and Colin Castleton. Now, Castleton we'll get to first. He has now signed with the Orlando Magic on an Exhibit 10-day deal, but he was picked up at the end of the year by the Toronto Raptors and has bounced around from a couple teams playing in some summer leagues. Played with the Raptors this year, unfortunately didn't look the best. That's why he was waived, and I will think will be playing for the Orlando Magic G League team going into this year. So not in the major for Castleton, but someone that the Raptors did lose and someone that was on the end of the roster for the end of the season. And then they also lost Chris Boucher, someone who was a part of that championship team in 2019, someone who has the best records for the Raptors coming off the bench. He is someone that has been virtually a key part of this Raptors team, but someone that has been on the trade block for the last 2 years as the Raptors have been, trying to maybe be a little bit worse, and Boucher obviously presenting himself to be a solid rotational player could help out teams in the rebounding department. He is a, smaller center, but can play that power forward, can stretch out the floor, and for the Boston Celtics is going to be a vital piece for their big man rotation, as obviously they have weakened front court, obviously, with losing Al Horford, losing Luke Cornett, and now having to utilize guys like Luka Garza, Namish Keita, Chris Boucher into that Xavier Tillman into that rotation. He's going to have a lot more to fight for there. And for the Raptors, they could have kept a guy in Boucher or brought him back. But for a team that had been trying to trade him, and with the Celtics having interest in him these last couple of seasons, it did make sense for them to cut losses with their veteran power forward. Maybe they should have traded him. Maybe his contract wasn't worth it those last 2 years for teams to make that. And maybe he is worth that veteran minimum contract now with the new CBA. But the Raptors do lose him for nothing. But I ultimately do think fill in that position with adding Sandro Mamukelashvili, who I think is a better age range for their young core. So I think it's the right move for the Raptors. So now let's get into this depth chart here and then go over my final predictions for this Raptors team. Obviously, when looking at this starting five, this is where I think it's going to go. It's going to be Emmanuel Quickley at that starting point guard position. He was obviously acquired with RJ Barrett for OG Anunoby, and they locked both of these guys up and made sure to take care of that, to have that new core. Quickley dealt with some injuries last year towards the beginning of the season. RJ Barrett really took some shine when the Raptors dealt with those injuries, so we'll have to see how this new core comes together with both of those guys, but I do like them two into this rotation. Then you got Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl. Obviously, Brandon Ingram being acquired by the Raptors last year at the trade deadline for a first-round pick, Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown. Brandon Ingram did not play at all last season after dealing with an injury that sent him out for the year. So the Raptors basically are taking a chance and were buying low on Brandon Ingram. They obviously gave him an extension, are believing in the Canadian veteran who is now going to try to take those leaps for this Raptors team alongside their face of their franchise that they view in Scotty Barnes, and obviously their great rotational center in Jakob Poeltl. When looking at this starting five, it is clear that it is a top, pretty solid starting five. Even if there are some issues within there, there's not a lot of shooting, and I do think besides Emmanuel Quickley, and I do think that there is a lot of isolation basketball between the guards shooting guard through power forward with RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, and Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes can play some point guard, and the Raptors have utilized that in the past, and he has been able to be a decent playmaker. But guys like Brandon Ingram and RJ Barrett, in my personal opinion, from viewing them and seeing them play basketball with the Knicks and the Pelicans these last couple of seasons, have been more just give me the ball and I'm going to get hot and I'm going to try to take over this game, hitting my mid-ranges and trying to be that other star for this team. And I feel like with both of those players being on one team, that's not a good solution because there's only one basketball for that. And we've seen this in the past with teams like the Phoenix Suns, where Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal all need the ball. We've seen it with the Brooklyn Nets with James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant in the past as well. And I feel like even though RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, and Scottie Barnes are not that level of those names that I just mentioned, I feel like they're going to have some similar issues to that cores that we have seen in the past. Also, like I mentioned, there's not a lot of shooting here. Great three-point volume shooting. Brandon Ingram hit a solid three-point shot. I know Emmanuel quickly can too, but RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes have struggled in those areas, so that does leave me a little worries for the Raptors. And then looking at the bench here, I do think that this can kind of be a little bit interchangeable, and I don't necessarily know where I'm fully putting my predictions here, but Sandro Mamukelashvili and Colin Murray-Boyles playing that backup front court. Obviously, Murray-Boyles, being a little bit smaller. He is transitionally going to fit into that forward position where he obviously can be that unique defender and can help out with Sandro being able to stretch the floor. Maybe that means that Sandro does play out on those perimeter guys, even if Murray-Boyles is the quote-unquote power forward. But we'll have to see what that really works for the Raptors. I do like that little meshing there. Then obviously, they have Ochai Agbaji, who was a solid wing defender for this Raptors team last season. Jacoby Walter, who they took that draft pick last year. And then Grady Dick, their other volume scorer. We may see him get into that shooting guard role. I don't necessarily know with this bench unit how concrete it is going to look, but I would expect Grady Dick, who had a pretty solid year last year towards the second half where the Raptors were enabling him to be that all-out scorer, to really help out and complement some of these other players. And maybe if Emmanuel Quickly or RJ Barrett does struggle throughout the season, you could see a guy like Grady Dick getting transitioned into that starting lineup. Or if the Raptors were to make a trade within one of these guys, as they have had some discussions with RJ Barrett in the offseason, that translates into this year. Due to fit reasons, maybe Grady Dick gets that starting spot. And then Jamal Shead, he was someone that made some big impacts for that Raptors team last year as a playmaker and as a defender. And someone that in this point guard room is going to be, in my opinion, the best defender. Could see some rises in this rotation as well. Garrett Temple being that veteran, he is obviously back. And then Jamison Battle and AJ Lawson are two young wings that were competing last season for some rotational run. AJ Lawson had come over from the Dallas Mavericks two-way squad. He then competed with the Raptors and now is being brought back. Battle obviously was someone I believe the Raptors selected in last year's draft, alongside as well Jonathan Mogbo, who was another young center that could maybe even help rise through the ranks for this Raptors team, as obviously their front court is a little bit weakened with some younger potential guys in there, with Jakob being that one main veteran like I mentioned. But Mogbo has some athletic ability. He can be a shot blocker, can maybe make some impact for this Raptors team, and that's where I come into with the Raptors here. Not much really changed. Ultimately, the core, in my opinion, is a little bit of a clogged isolation one, to where I don't know necessarily if it's going to really shine when meshing together. I think on paper the names look great, but ultimately the construction of the roster and how they're going to utilize one each other may make them a little bit worse. And that's where I have the Toronto Raptors finishing 12th here in this Eastern Conference. Now the Raptors could surprise me. They could be better than this, but I do have them above the other three teams I've already talked about, the Nets, the Bulls, and the Wizards. Ultimately, they are better than these three teams because they at least have some, name power on this squad that can kind of work together, right? Like I mentioned, Scottie Barnes, Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, man, quickly, Jakob Poeltl. This starting five is really good. And then you had, player that was just drafted in the top 10 in Colin Murray-Boyles, Sandro Mamukelashvili, who was a great rotational player. You have Grady Dick, Ochai Agbaji. This team has key rotational guys that can make impacts and key starters that can deliver in the NBA. It's just, will they ultimately coincide, mesh, and cohesively be able to play great basketball in an Eastern Conference that is a little bit weakened? I don't necessarily know. And they might have to see some more moves come to this roster to maybe see that bright path get a little bit better. But with, obviously, teams in this conference being pretty solid over the last couple years, I do struggle to give the Raptors much credit going into this next year. With the Atlantic Division, it's just very tough. So let me know your thoughts down below on the comment section on this Raptors team. Was I high on the Raptors? Am I too low on the Raptors? I feel like they're a little bit of a mixed team here, especially like I keep mentioning with this Eastern Conference. It is a little bit weakened with teams like the Celtics and the Pacers, the two teams who just made the NBA Finals, having their best players dealing with Achilles injuries. Obviously, that's going to hinder a bunch, and with teams like the Magic and the Knicks and the Hawks and the Pistons being at the top with not a lot of experience over these last couple of years, I feel like any shakeups could happen throughout the season or even in the playoffs that could really dictate who comes out of the East. Maybe the Raptors do surprise me by a storm, but I'm going to say right now they are not a playoff team, not even a play-in team. So let me know your thoughts, like I said, down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, as we're going to have a bunch of videos coming out here on this channel, not just off-season previews, but also diving once the season fully does start and going over teams and breaking down players' games. So once again, I really do appreciate all the love and support here on the channel, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.